The anime begins by introducing a game called New Gate, the most popular MMORPG around. In this game, players can become anything they want. However, the game has taken a dark turn and transformed into a deadly trap. Even worse, players can no longer log out, similar to the scenario in Sword Art Online. Shin, the top-ranked player, keeps fighting to find a way to save everyone and get them back home. He faces the boss, and after a tough battle, he manages to defeat it, allowing everyone to log out. Shin stays behind to make sure everyone else gets out safely, and he ends up being the last one to log out. But when he finally tries to log out, he finds himself transported 500 years into the future. When Shin arrives in the future, he notices that his inventory is still intact, and his skills have actually improved since he fought the boss. He uses a talisman to guide himself to his old hideout. On his way there, he sees an elf girl being dragged away by some humans who are demanding to know where Th3 is. Shin steps in to save the girl, who then introduces herself as Th3, a student of Shin's former ally, Th3. Shin sees through a spell that hides Th3's true identity as a dark-haired elf. Her dark hair is a result of a curse placed on her when she was young. Shin examines the curse and tells her he can lift it. He manages to break the curse, but only a part of her hair returns to its original silver color. Stepping out of a protective barrier for the first time, Th3 is overwhelmed with emotion. To thank Shin for saving her, she gives him a letter of introduction to the city. When Shin reaches the Belricht Kingdom, he uses the letter to go directly to the Adventurers Guild. He asks to join the guild and uses the letter of introduction to speed up the process. At the guild, he meets the guild master, who also received a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum. The guild master explains how important the letter is and why Shin must keep it safe. The guild master then tests Shin's abilities and recognizes his strength. Shin joins the guild as a G-rank adventurer and sets out on his first quest. While he's gathering herbs, he spots a huge monster and decides to attack it before it can harm more people. Despite the monster's incredibly high level, Shin defeats it by unleashing his full power. The episode ends with Shin picking up a gem and the monster's sword flying into the king's castle. Lady Rioni and her escorts trying to figure out where the mysterious sword came from. She orders the knights to find an appraiser to examine the sword and to discover who launched it. Meanwhile, Shin arrives in town and sees a crowd gathered in the center. He asks one of the knights about the injured men. The knight explains that they were attacked by skull-faced creatures and tells Shin about the sword that flew into the castle. Shin goes to the Adventurers Guild and hands in the core from the skull-faced Jack he defeated. He tells Celica about the monster's high level, which leaves her completely shocked. Celica then introduces Shin to Elm, an official at the guild, who appraises the core. Shin asks them to keep his identity a secret to avoid unnecessary attention. Later that evening, Shin goes out for dinner and meets Wilhelm the Vampire, one of the top adventurers in the kingdom. Wilhelm introduces himself and explains the meaning behind his nickname. The next day, Shin goes to the library to gather information about the current state of the world. Meanwhile, a special council meeting is held at the guild, attended by various officials, including the guild leader. They discuss the skull-faced Jack that Shin defeated, and many are surprised that Shin didn't take the monster's equipment. The Knight Captain asks about Shin's identity and reveals that the sword that flew into the castle is a legendary weapon, comparable to the kingdom's royal sword. Elsewhere, Shin is sitting by a fountain having lunch when a little girl starts staring at him. He invites her to try some of his food, and she eagerly accepts. Wilhelm then arrives to pick up the girl, explaining that she is from a nearby orphanage. Before they leave, the girl asks Shin to save a fox that is trapped in the northern forest. That night, Shin thinks about the girl's request. Since he has nothing else to do, he decides to go help. The next day, Shin goes to the Moon Sanctum and gives Th3 a weapon that belongs to Th3. He also gives her a set of magic envelopes for sending long-distance messages, which he hopes will help him contact Th3. Shin then heads into the northern woods, where he encounters a strange barrier that attacks people mentally. However, due to his incredibly high level, the barrier has no effect on him. He reaches a shrine at the center of the barrier and destroys it. Inside the shrine, he finds a little fox that has been cursed and poisoned. Shin heals the fox, but they are soon attacked by a wave of undead creatures. Shin defeats the undead, but the increasing miasma affects the shrine's guardians, causing them to become hostile. With the fox's help, Shin defeats the Guardians. He learns that the fox is a top-tier monster called Elemental, and he is pleased to have it as a companion. The episode ends with Shin receiving a message from Th3 informing her of Shin's arrival. Shin returns from the temple accompanied by an Elemental. He asks the fox-like creature to form a contract with him, and it agrees. Shin names the fox Yuzuha. Soon after, Shin receives a message from Th3 informing him that she has managed to contact Shin. Shin heads to the Adventurers Guild to report the number of skull faces he found surrounding the kingdom. After giving his report, Shin goes over to the mission board and notices a quest from the orphanage, seeking a skilled successor. Curious about it, he decides to take on the quest. He arrives at the church and asks to see Millie. Although the sister is cautious, she agrees to his request. Millie warmly hugs Shin, which helps the sister, Th3, to trust him. As Millie plays with Yuzuha, Shin asks Th3 for more details about the quest. Th3 explains that they need someone who knows how to perform a purifying spell and asks if Shin can teach it. In exchange for this skill, Shin requests information about Millie's special abilities and asks the church to share any information they have. Th3 is initially doubtful, but agrees after Millie tells her she trusts Shin. Th3 then explains that Millie is a star composer, which means she has the ability to see into the future. Shin asks if Th3 will be the one learning the purifying spell, but she declines, saying that the former priest's granddaughter will be the one to learn it. While waiting for the former priest's granddaughter, Shin spends some time with the children at the orphanage. The children ask if Shin will be the one to protect them from a greedy man who wants to close down the orphanage. Millie reassures the children, telling them that Shin will save them all, which helps to calm their fears. Shin eventually meets Sister Rashia, the former priest's granddaughter, who will be learning the purifying spell. Shin also asks for information about locations where there are many undead monsters. However, their conversation is cut short when Wilhelm arrives, immediately questioning what they have told Shin. Shin calmly shares what he has learned, which angers Wilhelm, but he calms down after finding out that Millie trusts Shin. Shin explains that the only way to learn the purifying skill is by defeating 150 undead monsters while holding a prayer orb. Even though Millie trusts Shin, Wilhelm remains skeptical. The two head to the diner to discuss things further, and Wilhelm asks Shin if he is one of the chosen, as that could explain his extensive knowledge. Surprised by the question, Shin assures him that he is not. Wilhelm then shares his reasons for helping the orphanage, which makes Shin laugh. Later, Shin, Rashia, and Wilhelm venture into the forest to battle the undead monsters. Shin and Wilhelm plan to disable the monsters by severing their limbs, allowing Rashia to deliver the finishing blow. Meanwhile, Lady Riona and her knights are struggling to fight a skull-faced Jack. Just when things look grim, Shin arrives and swiftly defeats the monster, saving them. Episode 4 of The New Gate begins with Shin healing Lady Riona's knights after their tough battle with the skull-faced monster. After ensuring the knights are okay, Shin leaves to continue patrolling the area, all the while thinking about reuniting with Shin. Meanwhile, Shin, Rashia, and Wilhelm are still on their quest to obtain the purifying skill. Wilhelm shows off the power of his weapon, making quick work of a skull-faced Jack. With the monster defeated, Rashia finally meets her quota and acquires the purifying skill. They celebrate their success, relieved that they can now save the orphanage from the greedy men threatening it. However, their celebration is interrupted when all the magical energy in the area gathers together, forming a powerful level 804 Skullface Lord. The Skullface Lord summons a legion of undead to surround Shin, Rashia, and Wilhelm. Wilhelm decides they should run, but Shin stays behind to keep the monsters from reaching the city. Shin unleashes his full power, removing his limiter, and uses his abilities to enhance Wilhelm's speed, allowing Wilhelm to escape safely with Rashia. As Shin battles the undead, the sounds of his fight reach Shin, who moves towards the commotion. Shin's map shows an ally approaching, so he goes to meet them. He arrives in a flower field accompanied by Yuzuha and finally meets Shin. Shin rushes to embrace Shin, and Yuzuha puts up a barrier to ensure they are not disturbed. After their heartfelt reunion, Yuzuha's barrier drops, and they come face to face with the Skullface Lord. Shin and Shin join forces to cast a powerful holy skill called Sanctuary, which destroys the low-level undead, leaving only the Skullface Lord. Shin strikes the monster with his sword. But just before the skull-faced lord dies, it speaks, surprising Shin. After the battle, Shin explains to Shni how he traveled through time and ended up in the future. Shni tells him about the seismic shifts that caused chaos on the continent, forcing the remaining helpers to go their separate ways. Shin asks Shni to stop calling him Master, as it could lead to misunderstandings. Blushing, Shni agrees and starts calling him by his name. Shin tells Shni that he plans to leave the new gate after finding a way through, which makes her sad. Changing the subjects, Shni suggests they have a celebration at the Moon Sanctum when they return to the kingdom. Meanwhile, Yuzuha reveals that she can talk and shows off her 3 tails to Shin. Shin asks her to hide the tails in public to avoid attracting attention. The group meets up with Wilhelm and Rashia, who are surprised and scared by how Shin and Shni arrived so quickly. Elsewhere, Lady Riona and her knights discover Shin's weapon among the battle's wreckage. The episode ends with one of the knights revealing that the only person capable of forging such a blade is the legendary blacksmith. Ryan and Jedris discuss the mysterious black blacksmith, who is thought to own the great sword Jedris carries. Ryan reveals that the black blacksmith also owns the Moon Sanctum, surprising Jedris. Ryan suggests they visit the Moon Sanctum after their mission to learn more about this enigmatic figure. Meanwhile, Wilhelm confronts Shin about why he is associated with Shni Razar, a powerful figure known for her independence and strength. Wilhelm is curious because Shni has a reputation for never bowing to anyone. Shin tries to lie, claiming that it was Shni who defeated the powerful skull-faced lord. However, Wilhelm doesn't believe him after witnessing Shin's own immense magical power during the battle. Shin reluctantly confesses that he is a high human, a being of immense power, and that Shni is his servant. Wilhelm explains that high humans are like gods, possessing extraordinary skills and powers. After this conversation, they decide to part ways. Wilhelm and Rashia head to the church, while Shin and Shni go to the Moon Sanctum. Before parting, Shin gives Wilhelm a magical letter to send messages, insisting that Wilhelm use it if needed. Upon arriving at the Moon Sanctum, Shni is greeted by Th3, who is curious about Shin's presence. Shni reveals that Shin is the owner of the Moon Sanctum, shocking Th3 because she knows that the owner is a legendary high human. Although Shin had previously told her he was a high human, she hadn't believed him until Shni confirmed it. Now the truth is undeniable, and Th3 is in awe. Shni prepares a meal, and they all gather to eat. During dinner, Shni mentions that the other supporting characters assumed Shin had died long ago. Th3, having drunk too much sake, becomes intoxicated and starts speaking incoherently. Shni decides to take her to her room to rest. Shin heads to his own room, where he finds Yuzuha asleep. He lies down and soon falls into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, Shin wakes up to find Shni beside him, quietly crying. He wipes away her tears, unsure why she is upset. They fall asleep again, and the next morning Shin finds white hair in his bed. He discovers it belongs to Yuzuha, who has transformed into a human form. Surprised, he tells Yuzuha to put on clothes and gives her an outfit that fits her. After breakfast, Shin, Shni, Th3, and Yuzuha gather to talk. Shin asks Yuzuha why she was at the temple. Yuzuha explains that it was the only place that didn't cause her pain. Shin asks about the event from 500 years ago when people disappeared, but Yuzuha doesn't have much information. She recalls a disaster that made it hard to breathe, leading her to seek refuge in the temple, where Shin saved her. Shni mentions that Gerard, one of the support characters from the game Shin used to play, wants to meet Shin. Gerard, a high beast, has lived far beyond his expected lifespan of 150 years. Despite this, Shni says Gerard has been waiting for Shin. He united many beast tribes and established the Farn Beast Alliance. He is also known as the first Beast King, and the current king is the 8th in line. Shin, eager to see Gerard, decides they will leave the next day. Shni suggests that Th3 register as an adventurer to accompany them. Shin invites Th3 to go to the guild with him. They leave the Moon Sanctum, enjoying the bright weather and the freedom of being outside. As they walk toward the guild, ready to start their next adventure, Shin apologizes for accidentally glancing at Th3's chest. Th3 acknowledges his apology, and they continue on their way, looking forward to the new challenges ahead. Shin and Th3 enter the town. Th3 is amazed by the large number of people gathered there, but Shin tells her it's actually a slow day compared to other days. He's amused by her amazement and finds it hard to believe that she was once afraid to even leave the shop. He takes her to the Adventurer Guild. When they arrive, Shin is immediately promoted to a rank adventurer because of his heroic deeds against the skull faces in the forest. Celia asks Shin about Th3, so he introduces her and tells Celia that Th3 wants to register as an adventurer. Shin also asks for information about sacred sites, but Celia denies his request because his rank isn't high enough. It needs to be at least B. He then asks for any missions they can do on the way to Farnet. Celia suggests a simple escort mission where they can work with another team, and they agree to take it. While waiting for Th3's guild card, Shin takes her around town to do some sightseeing. They visit an orphanage together, where the people thank Shin for helping them save the place. After that, they go back to the guild to pick up Th3's guild card, and then Shin teleports them back to the Moon Sanctum. He puts the shop into a necklace, and they head out to meet the merchant for their mission. Shin and Th3 arrive outside the city walls and meet Gahan and Tsubaki, who are their partners for this mission. They are introduced to Nak, the merchant they have to escort safely. Everyone introduces themselves and mentions their ranks, with Gahan revealing that he is a rank adventurer. At the same time, the kingdom of Belrect is worried because the Moon Sanctum has suddenly disappeared. The king calms down a bit when he hears that Shni is on her way to the castle. Tsubaki asks Shin if he's from Hinomoto, where most samurai come from, but he says no. Their conversation is cut short when some bandits block the road. The bandits threaten Nak and Tsubaki, which makes Shin start emitting a terrible bloodlust that even scares Th3. Th3 is horrified by the idea of having to kill someone, but she still shoots at the bandits hiding in the forest. Shin and the others defeat all the bandits, but they keep the boss alive for questioning. Shin asks the boss how they got their information. Th3 comes over and hugs Shin to help him calm down and stop his bloodlust. The episode ends with Th3 looking at Shin in embarrassment, while Shin seems confused. In episode 7, Shin, Th3, Gahan, and Tsubaki travel by horse-drawn carriage. Gahan suspects that the bandits who attacked them were after church goods being transported, but it seems the bandits were unaware of the specific nature of the cargo. Gahan believes their plan was to kill the driver and guards and then steal the entire carriage. Shin recalls that Thoria mentioned becoming a new priest requires church approval, and wonders if someone might be trying to sabotage them. The journey continues without further incident, and they arrive in Beirut. Mr. Nak is grateful and gives Shin and his companions a scroll to present to the guild as proof of their mission's completion. After reporting to the guild, Gahan and Tsubaki plan to head to Kilmet, while Shin and Th3 decide to travel to Farnet. Shin suggests they travel by carriage, and since the journey is long, he considers getting his own. They visit a carriage dealer, where Shin decides to buy a spacious carriage that can carry people, goods, and also be used for sleeping. The seller asks if Shin has horses for the carriage. When Shin replies he doesn't, the seller recommends strong-legged horses, noting that a large carriage might need more than one horse to pull it. Shin mentions that monsters can pull carriages. The seller agrees, but notes that monsters are harder to tame. Shortly after, Shin receives a telepathic message from Shni, who informs him that her business in the kingdom is finished and asks about his whereabouts. Shin explains he's in Baron, buying a carriage and looking for horses. Shni offers to find a suitable monster to pull the carriage, but needs another day to reach Farnet. She also mentions a commotion at the royal castle because the Moon Sanctum disappeared, which Shin finds surprising. Shni believes this is a fitting punishment for the kingdom's officials, who secretly monitored and tried to recruit her despite publicly praising her. Shin and Th3 find an expensive but luxurious inn and decide to stay, booking 2 rooms that cost nearly half their mission commission. Yuzuha transforms into her human form and enjoys the soft bed. While waiting for dinner, Shin maintains his weapons and Th3 joins him. They have dinner in Shin's room, and Yuzuha invites Th3 to bathe with her in Shin's bathroom, leaving Shin flustered. The next morning, Shin modifies the carriage by adding springs to the wheel axles to absorb shocks. Shni telepathically informs Shin she is near the North Gate. Shin encounters a large, powerful wolf monster named Grufagojad, which Shni had tamed to pull the carriage. Grufagojad has a horn, indicating it's a special species. Shni explains that to pull the carriage, the monster must be on par with a sacred beast. Shin is impressed but concerned about the monster's size. Shni instructs Grufagojad to shrink, showing its ability to change size. Tira recognizes the monster as one she helped when she was a child. Touched by the reunion, Schnee releases her contract with the monster, allowing Tira to form a new bond with it. They perform a ritual, and Tira becomes the monster's master. The group continues their journey to Farnet, traveling quickly and comfortably in their modified carriage. Shin has a casual conversation with Gerard, who is surprised to see Shin alive. Shin, equally surprised, asks how Gerard is still around. Gerard laughs, admitting he doesn't know. He then introduces Wolfgang, the king of beasts, and his daughter Kor. Gerard also introduces his confidants, Van Q and Rime Jalku. Shin introduces himself as a high human, triggering a flashback of him and Gerard fighting side by side in a past battle. Later, Shin, Gerard, and Schnee sit together on Gerard's terrace, reminiscing about their past adventures. When Schnee steps away to make tea, Gerard confides in Shin that he doesn't have much time left, believing he has only about a month to live. He feels his life, which has seemed to pause, is now slipping away since hearing of Shin's return. Gerard challenges Shin to a duel, expressing a desire to die as a warrior. Shin understands and accepts the challenge. Gerard has already informed Wolfgang and the others about his imminent death, feeling it's time to let go now that Wolfgang has proven to be a capable leader. That night, Gerard gathers his trusted friends, including Wolfgang and Kor, to tell them about his wish to die in a duel with Shin. Initially confused, they soon understand Gerard's intention. Having lived a long life, Gerard has seen his friends pass and their descendants grow. He wonders why he's still alive and believes the answer will come in the duel. Though initially upset, Kor eventually accepts her father's decision. The duel is scheduled for a week later in the great forest of Larua. As Shin prepares for the duel, he reflects on Gerard's request, understanding Gerard wants to leave the world on his own terms. On the morning of the duel, everyone gathers. Gerard shows Shin his worn-out gauntlet, which Shin repairs using the Moon Sanctum, restoring it to its original condition. The day of the duel arrives, and Shin and Gerard travel to the duel's location, a cliff overlooking the forest. Gerard has a final conversation with his confidants, entrusting the kingdom's future to Wolfgang and Kor. In the forest, Shin and Gerard begin their duel, fighting with intense attacks. Gerard transforms into a werewolf, increasing his speed and strength, while Shin responds with powerful magic. Both warriors push each other to their limits until their weapons break. Weakened, Gerard asks Shin for one final attack to see Shin's true power. Shin unleashes his strength, and Gerard accepts his fate, watching in awe. After the battle, Shin carries Gerard back. Wolfgang and Kor are saddened, but Shin reassures them Gerard fought valiantly. Gerard passes with a peaceful smile without regret. A grand funeral is held, and the entire Beast Kingdom mourns his passing. After the ceremony, Schnee finds Shin on the terrace and comforts him, reminding him it's okay to grieve the loss of a friend. In a bustling city, Shin notices Schnee and Tira are dressed oddly and asks why. Schnee explains that as an elf, she stands out, so she disguised herself as a beast to blend in. Tira enjoys the disguise because it looks realistic. Shin notes to himself that he created such disguises as a joke, but now they are proving useful. They hurry to meet Shebade, a member of the High Dragonal race and an ally of Shin, attending Gerard's funeral as a representative of Kilmont, a dragon kingdom allied with Farnad. At an inn, they meet Wolfgang and Kor, where Shebade pledges loyalty to Shin. Shin asks Shebade to relax and calls him by his real name. They discuss Gerard's death and Shebade's past as the first king of Kilmont, before he cut ties with the royal family. Shin gives Shebade his personal weapon, the Spear Najizuki, repaired and strengthened to be 5 times more powerful. After saying their goodbyes, Shin, Schnee, Tira, and Kor head to the guild. Shin takes on a quest to defeat goblins to raise his adventurer rank. They easily complete the quest and check on a forest damaged during Shin and Gerard's battle, finding it as recovered. After submitting proof of the goblin hunt, Shin receives a letter from Barlix, head of the Beerith Guild branch, summoning him to the royal palace. Schnee and Tira wonder why, but Shin recalls his battle with Skull-Faced Jack and a powerful monster sword that flew far away. They decide to head to Beerith immediately, though Kor stays behind due to other obligations. Before leaving, Shin gives Wolfgang Gerard's repaired gauntlet, impressing him. The next day, Shin, Tira, and Schnee use teleportation to reach Beerith, Arriving at the moon's sanctum, they sense people nearby but use a skill to stay hidden. They proceed to the guild, where they are greeted by Silica and Celica. Shin mentions the letter from the guild leader, and Celica confirms it, teasing Shin about being surrounded by beautiful women. He jokes back about having male friends like Wilhelm. Celica reveals Wilhelm is rumored to be as strong as a rank S, making him hard to approach. Shin is then allowed to enter the guild leader's room. In the guild leader's room, Barlix and a wizard named Arid discuss a sword that flew to the royal palace. Arid explains that the sword belonging to Skullface ended up in the room of the second princess, Rayan, causing a stir. The sword's attributes are impressive, rivaling the nation's sacred swords. Arid links the sword's magic to a gem Shin brought, easing suspicions about him. Barlix explains that Princess Rayan has shown interest in Shin. Shin worries he might be punished for almost injuring her, but Barlix reassures him that Rayan has fought Skullface before and understands the necessity of fighting with full strength. That night, Shin tells Shni and Tira about the situation. Shni speculates the kingdom might want to recruit Shin or arrange a marriage. She suggests Shin could say he's engaged to Shni or Tira to avoid such offers. The next day, Shin is escorted by Gadris, a strong knight, to meet Princess Rayan. She shows him the large sword and asks if he knows about it. Shin confirms it belonged to Skullface, whom he defeated. Rayan says the kingdom often summons strong individuals, but initially suspected Shin of having ulterior motives. Now her intuition tells her he's trustworthy. Gadris adds that the letter from the Moon's Sanctum is a key reason for trusting Shin. Rayan then says she wants to duel Shin, leaving him speechless. In episode 10, Gadres argues with Rioni about recruiting Shin. Gadres thinks Shin should have been recruited first, then tested, but Rioni disagrees and says Shin should be tested before joining. Rioni grabs her sword and invites Shin to start the test. Gadres gives up and follows. They arrive at a room with a teleportation crystal. Rioni says they'll teleport to a training ground. They touch the crystal and appear in a large room filled with weapons. Shin chooses a sword, and Rion picks a large one. Shin is impressed by how easily Rion swings it. The fight begins, and both sides clash evenly. Rayan throws her sword and attacks Shin with a kick, surprising him. Shin adjusts his strategy and attacks Rion. They continue to fight, but neither can overpower the other. Eventually, Shin suggests they stop, and Rayan agrees since her sword is damaged. After the battle, Rayan offers Shin a high-ranking job, but he refuses, wanting to remain a free adventurer. Rayan respects his decision and invites him to contact her if he changes his mind. Shin asks about a sword that was there earlier. Rayan explains it's part of an old tradition where men propose by giving a sword. Shin is surprised, but Rayan reassures him it's just a formality now. Shin gives her the sword and in return asks for access to a restricted section of the magic library. They teleport back to the original room and find two unconscious guards. An old man named Cardinal Grail is also there, under a spell. Suddenly, the teleport crystal glows again, and Shin and Rayan are teleported to the Holy Land Kalkia. Shin contacts his comrades and plans to meet in the city of Volmer. Shni, worried, contacts Shin, and he explains the situation. They suspect a demon is behind the spell controlling Grail. Shni and her friend Tira sneak into the palace to investigate. They put guards to sleep and reach the prison where Grail is held. Grail doesn't remember being under the spell. Shni tries to remove it, but is attacked by a demon named Maganamuku, a high-level Count-class demon. Shni fights him off with her sword Blue Moon and defeats him. The demon realizes Shin's master has returned. After defeating the demon, Shni reports to the king. The king, the princess, and Gadres are relieved to hear that Shin and Rayan are safe. The king pardons Grail. Shni and Tira then leave to meet Shin in Volmer. Shin and Rian find themselves in the Holy Land, a mysterious place known for its dangerous monsters. Rian admits it's her first time there, but she's heard that it takes multiple chosen ones to defeat the creatures within. Fortunately, they still have the Skullface sword, a powerful weapon, teleported with them. Shin appears unarmed but assures Rian that it's not a problem. Secretly, he doesn't want her to know the full extent of his abilities, as it could complicate his life and force him into a role he doesn't want. Rian explains that the Holy Land Kalkia has 4 gates, and the Royal Investigation Team had entered through the southern one. There's a smaller door inside the gate that can help open and close it. Eager to escape, Shin tries jumping over the walls, but each time he is sent back to his original spot. After several attempts, Shin realizes the area has become a dungeon, similar to the ones he encountered in a game world. In this dungeon, they're forced to follow specific routes, and if they deviate, they are reset. The only way forward is by following the balls of light, which act as teleportation points. Shin checks the next teleportation point and confirms it's safe for them to proceed. After teleporting, as they move forward, Shin detects about 20 more monsters in the dungeon, but they are limited to specific areas. Their next challenge comes when they face a slime monster named Gillywise, which has a level of 684. Rian initially underestimates the creature and rushes in, but her attacks have no effect and she becomes trapped. Gillywise's attacks are powerful, but Shin uses sand element magic to free Rian. He explains that Gilslay is resistant to physical attacks, so they must coordinate their efforts. Shin uses fire magic to weaken the monster and expose its core, a purple stone. Rian then destroys the core with her sword, defeating the monster. However, the fight leaves Ryan's clothes torn from the monster's attacks. Embarrassed, Rian quickly covers herself and Shin hands her spare clothes to change into. She's thankful but also flustered, as the clothes are a bit tight. After this awkward moment, they continue their journey. Shin asks Rian if she knows any magic. She admits she only knows beginner-level spells, so Shin decides to teach her a technique called imitation enchantment. With this skill, Rian enchants her skull-faced sword with fire and successfully cuts through a rock with ease. As they near the gate, they notice a large, mysterious object blocking their path. Suddenly, a griffin-shaped monster emerges from the shell. Shin immediately realizes it's no ordinary monster as it begins attacking with ice magic, freezing the area around them. Shin acts as a decoy, luring the monster while Rian tries to find a way to open the gate. Despite Shin cutting off the griffin's head multiple times, it regenerates every time. Shin suspects the monster's regeneration is linked to a spell connected to the gate mechanism. Shin unleashes his full power using the limit-off ability, finally causing the griffin to stop regenerating. He attacks its head with fire magic, flare burst, delivering a decisive blow. Meanwhile, Rian manages to open the gate, allowing them to escape the dungeon. After exiting, Shin contacts Th3 to let her know they are safe and will be heading to the city of Balmul to meet up with his friends. Th3, though not angry, seems jealous when she hears Shin will be camping with Rian. At night, Shin sets up camp and Rian teases him playfully, making him feel awkward. As the night progresses, Shin hears something in the distance and is shocked to see a large army of monsters heading toward the city of Balmul, signaling that their adventure is far from over. A flood occurs when evil energy from the Holy Land overflows, turning into monsters. Shin notices that most of these creatures are low-level monsters, but their numbers pose a big threat. Balmul has strong defenses and troops, but Rian explains that it has become a fortress city due to its proximity to the Holy Land. Shin instructs Th3 to hurry to Balmul as they prepare to face the flood. When they arrive, Shin estimates the monsters will reach Balmul in a few days. Rian reports to the ruler, while Shin reports to the guild. At the guild, Shin meets Baron Lact and informs him about the coming flood. The guild leader, trusting Shin, declares a state of emergency and coordinates with the military to evacuate citizens. Shin offers to help, and after the meeting, he reconnects with his old friend Barrett. Barrett shares information about other players and player killers in this world, surprising Shin. The flood reminds Shin of past battles, and he prepares for the impending attack. As the flood approaches, Th3 unleashes a massive blue lightning spell, destroying many monsters, though many still survive. Shin uses his sword's magic to destroy a large number of creatures, but holds back some of his power. Rian also fights valiantly, and she is soon joined by Wilhelm, who helps her defeat a powerful monster. Tira, having exhausted her magic, receives help from Rashia to restore her energy. In the heat of battle, Shin dons red armor and fights under a new identity, Red, to avoid revealing his true power. He uses a cursed weapon that absorbs the monster's hatred, cutting through their ranks. After defeating the smaller monsters, Shin faces the event boss, a demon controlling the flood. Shin activates his limit-off ability and quickly defeats the demon, ending the battle with no casualties. The battle over, Balmul hosts a party to celebrate the victory. Shin, however, feels out of place at such events. At the party, Th3 reveals her jealousy over Shin's interactions with Rian, which leads to an emotional conversation between her and Shin. Th3 admits she was afraid of Shin reverting to his cold, distant self if he learned about the player killers in this world. She confesses her love for him, even though she knows he might one day return to his original world. The episode ends with Shin reflecting on his unresolved feelings for Marino, a woman from his past, while also acknowledging Shni's confession. He remains uncertain about the future, but is aware that his adventures in this world are far from over, especially with the lingering threat of player killers.